Minister.
My honourable friend, Mr Speaker, is absolutely right. SNP members are usually only too keen to tell us about what the Scottish Government is doing and how the UK Government should follow suit. Clearly that does not apply in the case of shipbuilding, where the Scottish Government's record is shameful, and it is the UK Government that is delivering for Scotland. Not just in shipbuilding, but from levelling up to energy security and transport connectivity, it is us that is taking the lead.
Jen Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The SNP haven't built any of the ferries they plan to replace, not one, in their 2012 ferry strategy. And the average lifespan of these lifeline vessels has soared since the SNP came to power, from 17 to 24 years. Does my right honourable friend agree the Scottish Government needs to address this as a matter of urgency?
Minister.
Indeed, my honourable friend is absolutely right. And not only are the two over-budget ferries languishing in the yard, but the CalMax Engineering Division head has revealed that the existing vessels could fail at any time. At the weekend, he said there are no spare ferries, so when one goes out of action, stand-ins are deployed from other services, and that has a knock-on effect on other routes. The ships are so busy that there is not enough time to do deep maintenance. And it was reported that more than a third of CalMax fleet are beyond their 30-year design life, more likely for them to break down. These are the issues that the Scottish Government should be concentrating on, rather than another unnecessary and unwanted rerun of an independence referendum.
Dave Dugan.
Many thanks, Mr Speaker. Will the Minister agree with the Armed Forces Minister, who just last week went on record as confirming that the record of warship building in Scotland is based on engineering excellence, outstanding quality and the role of higher education and defence manufacturing in Scotland, not charity and not any kind of gesture politics. It's about skill and ability.
Minister.
Scotland has a long and proud history of shipbuilding. What I can say to the honourable gentleman is that the biggest threat to future orders is his party's plan to break up the United Kingdom.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. On the point of shipbuilding, I originally come from a shipbuilding community and saw how the shipbuilding in the Clyde declined. But for my constituents in Edinburgh West now, their concern is in building up our industries and creating jobs. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that the moves to improve shipbuilding are far more important than money wasted on vanity projects, ferries that don't work, and a referendum which the majority of people in Scotland do not want to spend the time on divisive arguments?
Very democratic, isn't it? Not true. Behaving like people.
Can I just say, I want to hear the question. If you don't hear it, I wouldn't challenge. No. Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Unfortunately, in Scotland, we're used to the SNP just shouting down people who don't agree with. What I was going to ask was if the Minister agrees with me that the people of Scotland would be far better served addressing those problems, assisting the UK Government in rebuilding our shipbuilding industry and helping constituents like mine in Edinburgh West than wasting £20 million on a referendum on an issue that we don't want to discuss again and has been said.
Come on, Minister, we've only half an hour. Can't use on one question.
I completely agree with the honourable lady, and I believe that our shipbuilding strategy gives a long-term vision and confidence for yards in Scotland and the supply chain to make the investments and deliver the ships, whether for military or civilian use, that we want to see.
Blair Anderson.
Question number 2, please, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Government recognises the vital importance of Scotland in achieving our goals on carbon capture, utilisation and storage. We have supported Scottish CCUS projects through the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge Fund and meet regularly with project developers and stakeholders.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear about those regular meetings. During COP26 in Glasgow, both the UK and the Scottish governments rightly spoke of the importance of doing everything we can at home to reduce our emissions. Yesterday, Nicola Sturgeon re-announced her plans for an independence referendum. So action on the environment, the cost of living crisis, kick-starting the economy, upgrading the health service have taken a back seat to greater constitutional division. Has the department estimated what impact a divisive referendum would have on investment investment in carbon capture and storage in Scotland?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank her for her question, and I agree with her sentiment. We are engaging continuously on CCUS with the Acorn cluster and other possibilities. But can I just agree with her in terms of the impact that the SNP would have on energy policy? They're anti-nuclear, they are anti-oil and gas. It's hard to see where they think they were going to get their energy from in the event of independence. Perhaps they have some kind of idea of a future deal with Vladimir Putin.
Jacob Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Carbon capture and storage is critical for the production of blue hydrogen and therefore in helping us reach the government's 2030 hydrogen targets. What opportunities does he see for the potential of the hydrogen economy in Scotland, in Teesside and in the rest of the UK?
Well, I thank my honourable friend, who is the chair of the APPG on hydrogen, and for his continuing support for hydrogen-related projects and CCUS-related projects. And certainly we see this as offering opportunities for the whole of the United Kingdom. Teesside will play a big part of it, Scotland will as well as other parts of England and Wales. We see it as a big whole of the UK effort, crucial to levelling up, crucial to the Union as well.
Yep.
Angela Crawley.
Question number 3, Speaker.
Minister.
The United Kingdom is the most successful political, economic, social and cultural union the world has ever seen, and is a foundation on which our citizens and businesses are able to thrive. This government is committed to protecting and promoting its combined strength, building on hundreds of years of partnership and shared history, because when we work together collaboratively as one United Kingdom, we are safer, stronger, more prosperous, better able to draw on the skills of our great shared institutions, and better able to respond to the challenges such as the pandemic and supporting families with the cost of living.
Angela Crawley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, the Scottish Tory manifesto stated that a vote for them was a vote to stop an independence referendum, and yet they only achieved 22% of the vote. So does the Minister accept that the people of Scotland have a right to have a vote on the 19th of October 2023 because their campaign message has failed?
Mr. Speaker, the constitutional issue is we're so far down the list of people's priorities when that poll took place. What the people of Scotland want are their governments, whether that's local, Scottish or United Kingdom government, to be working together on addressing the issues that matter to them and responding to the big challenges we face as a country and world.
Shadow Secretary of State Ian Murray.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the Minister would wish to join me in congratulating the Bridge Cafe in Gilmerton in my constituency for winning Cafe of the Year yesterday, and the Rotary of Braids on their 50th anniversary. Some wonderful achievements locally, and good luck to Andy, no relation Murray, at Wimbledon this afternoon. Mr. Speaker, in the latest poll in Scotland, the Prime Minister has a net approval rating of -71. Included in that negative figure, of course, is the Scottish Conservative leader, every single Scottish Conservative MSP and Scottish MP, except for the Secretary of State himself. So does the Minister think that the threat to the Union posed by the Prime Minister clinging to his job is a price worth paying?
Minister.
Well, first of all, I'll be delighted to congratulate the cafe in the Honourable Gentleman's constituency, and when I'm next in Edinburgh I will endeavour to pay a visit. I don't agree with the Honourable Gentleman. This government, this Prime Minister, is focusing on the big issues that face Scotland and the whole United Kingdom. Keeping the West safe from Russian aggression, dealing with the global economic challenges from the pandemic and the war, and addressing the long-term challenges like energy security and climate change. That's what we are focusing on.
Ian Murray.
The very fact the Minister's got to read that list tells its own story. The simple truth is that the Prime Minister puts the Union at risk every single day that he clings on. The country knows that, his party's backbenchers know that, and even the First Minister knows it, which is why she wants him to stay. Yesterday was nothing more than an attempt by the First Minister to deflect from her horrendous record in government and to hinder the prospect of a future Labour government that replaces his. That's what she fears the most. The only thing that matters to Nicola Sturgeon is, of course, independence, not soaring NHS waiting times, hungry children, drug deaths, increasing poverty, widening educational attainment, or Scots worried about their bills. So why won't the Minister recognise that the Prime Minister is nothing but a gift to the SNP and put the future of the UK ahead of his blind loyalty to the Prime Minister?
Minister.
Well, I do agree with one part of the honourable gentleman's question, and that is what the real focus of the Scottish Government is. It is, as he says, not on addressing the real challenges in Scotland. It is about appeasing the hardliners in the Separatist Party. We are not going to be deflected from getting on with the job that we were elected to do.
David DeWitt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I totally agree with the words of my honourable friend when he says there are multiple priorities that should be to the forefront of the attention of the First Minister and SNP members in this House. All of them very, very challenging, but one very simple thing the Scottish Government could do is join the UK Government's approach to genetic technology and precision breeding. Does my honourable friend agree that that would be a simple thing for the Scottish Government to agree to meet the priorities of Scottish farmers, food producers and research institutes?
Minister.
The issue of gene editing crops is a very important one. My honourable friend is absolutely right to raise it. There is a widespread view in Scotland in the agriculture sector that this is a good move to improve crop yields and resilience, part of our food security. It is only the dogma of the SNP government that is preventing Scotland joining in with the rest of the UK in this important technology. The door is open for them to put aside their blind adherence to EU laws and join with us in developing this important technology.
We now come to SNP spokesperson Murray Black.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, given that the UK wields the most control over the Scottish economy, my question is pretty simple. Why are independent countries, similar to Scotland, wealthier, more productive, have higher social mobility, have lower poverty levels, a smaller gender pay gap and lower inequality? In other words, can you not see that when it comes to Scotland, it's this government and this union that's holding us back?
Minister.
Well, before I answer the honourable lady's question, may I just congratulate her on her recent wedding. And although we will disagree on many subjects, on this one I hope we can agree that a union is better than independence. On the substance of our question, this union has been one of the most economically productive in history, and only the separatists could believe that the creation of a hard border between Scotland and England, when 60% of Scotland's exports are to the rest of the United Kingdom, only the separatists could believe that creating such a hard border would be in our economic and social interests.
Murray Black.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome his warm words to me, but I would like to remind him that unions have to be voluntary as well. The leader of the Scottish Conservatives has actually changed his view on the Prime Minister 3 times in 6 months. So why then does this government refuse to let people in Scotland change their view after 8 years?
Minister.
The union is, of course, voluntary. And the question was put and decisively answered. And of all the comments recently, I think the most revealing was from Cabinet Secretary Angus Robertson, who basically said that even if there was another referendum and it voted Scotland voted to stay part of the Union, they would keep going. It would be a never-ending. That uncertainty and chaos would be bad for Scotland and bad for the United Kingdom. We want to level up the country and address the challenges. They want to divide Britain and divide Scotland.
Benson.
Question 4, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 4, 9 and 11 together. I regularly discuss important issues on improving union connectivity with ministerial colleagues. Earlier this year, for example, I co-chaired a roundtable discussion with transport ministers and Scottish stakeholders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Union Connectivity Review provides a boost for regional airports and domestic aviation by suggesting ways in which public service obligations could be reformed to support regional flights. Does the Minister agree with me that restoring commercial passenger flights between Blackpool Airport and locations in Scotland would boost economic growth, help to create jobs and investment in both locations?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Scotland's love affair with Blackpool has existed for decades and is well known. And the more Scots who can visit my honourable friend's lovely constituency, the better. We, of course, recognise the importance of maintaining a thriving and competitive aviation sector in the UK. I know my honourable friend is a strong campaigner for more air services to and from Blackpool, and we will continue to consider whether there are further opportunities to utilise public service obligations to meet our union connectivity and levelling up objectives.
Vickers.
Mr. Speaker, the Union Connectivity Review recommended that the UK Government work with the Scottish Government on an assessment of the East Coast Transport Corridor to include improvements to the East Coast and Main Line and the A1. Can my honourable friend update the House on progress in bringing forward this recommendation?
Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Government are grateful to Sir Peter Handy for his work and we are considering his recommendations carefully. The Prime Minister has welcomed and intends to accept the proposal for a creation of UKNet, a strategic transport network spanning the entire United Kingdom. The funding the UK Government has set aside for this review will put us on the right path to strengthen and maintain our transport arteries for people and businesses across the UK.
Ken Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Connectivity between Scotland and England matters especially for the area I represent in Cumbria and, of course, South West Scotland. Does the Minister share my concerns that the Scottish Government is not helping to deliver the investment, especially with regards to the Border Rail Feasibility Report and road building generally?
Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I was very pleased to be able to visit my honourable friend's constituency and see the value of the levelling up projects in his area as part of the growth deal in and around Carlisle Station. And I'm very keen to see the feasibility study work commence on the board, extending the Borders rail line. And I've recently met with the Rail Minister to progress this project.
Martin Docker to use.
Belfast Harbour's reported levels of trade and increase in turnover and profits of 17% to 73.3 million for 2021. So improving union connectivity for Northern Ireland, even with a tweaked protocol, why won't the Secretary of State's office campaign for union connectivity with the greatest booster of our economy, the European Union?
Well, Mr. Speaker, what we are focusing on in terms of the trade from Northern Ireland to Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom is part of the Union connectivity recommendations on upgrading the A75 and the A77. We want to do it. I've been very keen to meet the Scottish Transport Minister, who continues to refuse to meet me or my ministerial colleagues. Perhaps he could have a word with her to get that meeting in place.
Mr. Carmichael.
Mr. Speaker, the decision to leave the EGNOS satellite programme last year has had catastrophic implications for the reliability of Lifeline air services and even the air ambulance service across the Highlands and Islands. We were told at the time it was done on the basis of cost, but we now know that for every pound spent on EGNOS, there is a £2.60 benefit to the UK economy. This was one of Dominic Cummings' madder ideas, Mr. Speaker. Is it not time to admit as such and rejoin EGNOS, improve air services in the Highlands and Islands?
Well, I'm grateful for the right honourable gentleman's question, and I am aware of the EGNOS issue and discussed it with my colleague, the Aviation Minister, some time ago. I am aware that Loganair has written to my colleague, the Secretary of State for Transport, pointing out additional evidence. I'd be very happy to meet with him to discuss that further, but I do know that my colleagues in the Department for Transport are working with the industry to deliver a good replacement.
Alan Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We promised a bridge to Northern Ireland, which everyone knew wouldn't happen, but we haven't seen the money for that. We promised High Speed 2 would run to Scotland in day one, and not only is it not running in day one, they've now taken away the Goulburn link. Isn't it the case that this UK Government has run a Scorched Earth policy in terms of union connectivity, in terms of the union overall?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman is, I'm afraid, completely wrong. Scotland will be connected to HS2 from day one, and the project will deliver will deliver enormous capacity and journey time improvements. On a specific issue of the Goulburn link, Sir Peter Hendy's review found it was not the optimal way to connect the high-speed line to the classic network. But we are looking at better alternatives to deliver that increase in capacity.
Stafford, to 5, please.
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As DLUC and the Scotland Office are delighted that the UK Government's Freeport programme is being extended to Scotland. UK Government funding of up to £52 million for 2 new green freeports will boost Scotland's economy by regenerating communities, creating high-quality jobs and supporting the transition to a net-zero economy.
Alexander Stafford. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK Government expects the existing confirmed freeports to add £24 billion to the UK economy. Does my right honourable friend agree that it's vital that all political parties get behind the Green Freeports initiative to maximise the benefits that bring to Scotland and the whole of the UK, rather than a divisive, costly and unwanted referendum on Scottish separatism?
Minister. My honourable friend's absolutely right. We've received 5 competitive bids for Scottish Green Freeports, and the 2 governments are working closely together to assess the proposals. I'm confident that we'll announce 2 outstanding winners, which will create highly paid jobs and help regenerate the areas around the ports, and they will be global and national hubs of trade, innovation and investment.
Senator Minister List-West.
Mr. Speaker, there are 5 excellent bids from across Scotland for the 2 proposed green freeports. Each of the bids are of such high quality that it would be a great shame not to support the local economies in Inverness and Cromarty, Orkney, the Forth, the Clyde and Aberdeen Peathead. So can I ask the Minister whether his department will consider what support can be given to unsuccessful areas and whether the support can be widened?
Mr. Speaker, we will certainly look at that. Of course, there is intense competition for these freeports, which will create huge benefits for the local area, but also all of Scotland.
We now come to Chris Elmore.
Number 6, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've just said in answer to the Honourable Gentleman for Kilmarnock and Loudon, Scotland is set to benefit from the boost in connectivity and the huge economic benefits HS2 will bring. Scotland will be connected to the HS2 network from the day it opens, and further work will be done in the years ahead to optimise journey times and capacity. In addition, I'm very pleased that 100 permanent jobs will be created at the new HS2 Annandale depot in Dumfries and Galloway.
Chris Elmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the day of the confidence vote in the Prime Minister, the Government tried to sneak out of the Colburn link of HS2, a £2 billion rail link between Glasgow and the northwest of England, had been scrapped. So how can the Minister say that Scotland will benefit from connectivity of HS2 when they're secretly trying to get rid of lines linking the north of England with Scotland and also reducing the overall connectivity between the nations of the United Kingdom?
Well, as again I've just said to the honourable gentleman, the removal of the Goulburn link was because Sir Peter Hendy had found in his connectivity review that it wasn't the best way of addressing the capacity constraints between Crewe and Preston. But we are looking at better options for it. We are absolutely committed to HS2, and I believe that this line will help connectivity from Scotland to England and also encourage a modal shift to more environmentally friendly forms of transport.
Michael Fabricant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With millions of tonnes of soil being moved across Lichfield, with roads being closed and the canal being obstructed in Lichfield due to HS2, perhaps we can help Scotland by giving them our bit of HS2.
Minister.
Well, I know my honourable friend is a doughty campaigner against HS2. We've had that debate, I'm afraid. I'm always happy to discuss with him how we can optimise the building work. My right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, is sitting next to me. I'm sure he's heard his representations. But I'm an enormous believer in the potential of high-speed rail links to transform the economic potential of this country.
We're now going to come to Prime Minister's questions. Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I would like to point out the British Sign Language interpretation of proceedings is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. We now start with questions to the Prime Minister. I start with Andrew Jones.
Thank you, Mr.
Question 1.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been asked to reply on behalf of my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister. He attended the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda, the G7 Leaders Summit, and today he's at the NATO Summit in Madrid. Mr. Speaker, I know that the thoughts of the whole House will be with the family and friends of Dame Deborah James following the news of her death. I lost my father at a young age to cancer. I will know firsthand the pain that her family must be feeling. But we also know that Dame Deborah was a huge inspiration to so many and raised millions to help others affected by cancer.
Andrew Jones.
Nationally, 52% of disabled people are in work, compared with 81% for non-disabled people. Disability Action Yorkshire, which is a charity based in Harrogate, works to close that gap, and they have highlighted the success of the Access to Work scheme. For example, one young person, having been told he would never work, is now, thanks to the targeted support available, a trainee brewer at Roosters Brewery. So will my right honourable friend consider how we can boost awareness amongst employers of this Access to Work scheme, and also consider how we can simplify the application process so more disabled people don't get deterred and will embrace it?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for raising the work of Disability Action Yorkshire? They're doing terrific work in his constituency. I can reassure him that the DWP is committed to improving awareness through campaigns and partnerships with employers, but also disability organisations. They're also working specifically on a digital service which will make it more accessible and more visible.
Deputy Leader Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I also share with the Deputy Prime Minister his deepest condolences and his personal experience as we mourn the loss of Dame Deborah James, who fearlessly campaigned to inspire so many, and I'm absolutely sure there's no doubt that she saved the lives of many more. And to the family of Zara Alina, who was tragically murdered this week on the streets of Ilford. Well, Mr. Speaker, I also want to congratulate the two honourable members, the new members, who won in the by-elections this week, including my honourable friend, the member for Wakefield. Mr. Speaker, this week the government lost two by-elections in one day, the first in 3 decades. It's no wonder that the Prime Minister has fled the country and left the honourable member to carry the can. The people of Wakefield and Tiverton held their own vote of no confidence. The Prime Minister isn't just losing the room, Mr. Speaker, he's losing the country. But instead of showing some humility, he intends to limp on until the 2030s. So does he think the Cabinet will prop him up for this long?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I thank the right honourable lady. I gently point out to her that we want this Prime Minister to go on a lot longer than she wants the leader of the Labour Party to go on. Mr. Speaker, we've got a working majority of 75. We're focusing on delivering for the British people. Record low unemployment. Wouldn't have happened if we'd listened to the Labour Party. More policing, tougher sentencing in force this week. Police, courts, Crime and Sentencing Act. She voted against both, so did the Labour Party. And we'll protect the public from these damaging rail strikes when we've got the scene of Labour front benchers joining the picket lines.
Here we go again, but the truth is, what I want for my honourable friend, the Leader of this opposition, is not to be the Leader of the opposition, but to be the Prime Minister of this country. And to be honest, Mr. Speaker, it couldn't come quick enough. Britain can't stomach this Prime Minister for another 8 years. His own backbenchers can't stomach him for another 8 minutes. And if they continue to prop him up, Mr. Speaker, I doubt the voters will stomach him for even 8 seconds in the ballot box. Now let's imagine, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is still clinging on into the 2030s. Under this tax-high, low-growth Tory government, at this rate, by 2030, the British public will have endured 55 tax rises. So how many more tax rises will this government inflict on working families before he says enough is enough?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think she was right first time. Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you what we're doing. Near record levels of youth unemployment, 3.8% unemployment. We're cutting taxes next month on national insurance, £330 million. We're delivering for families through the difficult times of the cost of living. What about the Labour Party? We heard yesterday what their plan is. Their plan is no plan. The leader of the Labour Party said he's wiping the slate clean. He's starting from scratch. He's only been in the job 2 years. Sir Tony Blair, who's actually got some experience of winning elections, says there's a gaping hole in Labour's policy offer, and all the while there's a smile creeping over her face. All the while she's revelling in it. We're getting on with serving the people of this country. She's just playing political games.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd revel in the opportunity for the people of this country to have more than just by-elections to see what they think of this government opposite. Call a general election and see where the people are, Mr. Speaker. And this is a man who once said high levels of government taxation was hurting UK competitiveness. Now he's backing the Prime Minister who wants to put taxes up 15 times. At this rate, Mr. Speaker, working people will be paying £500 billion more in tax by 2030. Yeah. How high does he think the burden on working people should get before he says enough is enough?
Deputy Prime Minister.
We're the ones helping working people with a tax cut of £330, with the support for those on the lowest incomes, with the £650 support for 8 million on the lowest incomes, and with, frankly, the record level of investment coming into this country, from the £1 billion by Moderna for vaccines to the highest level tech investment in Europe, according to Atomico. We are the ones with a plan for low unemployment, a high wage, a high skill economy. At Labour, it's back to year zero.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, he pretends to emphasise with those struggling with the Tory cost of living crisis when it was he himself who once said that food bank users are not in poverty but simply have a cash flow problem. The honourable member doesn't. He spent over £1 million in 9 months on private jets. It shows how out of touch this government is, Mr. Speaker. But at this rate, by 2030, 1 million more people will be using food banks. How many more working people will be pushed into poverty by his Prime Minister before he says enough is enough?
I tell you, if the Labour Party, if the Right Honourable Lady wants to help working people, they should be clear in standing up against these militant, reckless strikes by RMT. The Right Honourable Lady has flip-flopped. The Right Honourable Lady has flip-flopped all over the place when it came to these strikes. First she said they were lose-lose, then she tweeted workers were left with no choice. When she was asked by the BBC, straight question, she's normally a straight-shooting politician, do you like the RMT? She said, I'm going to have to go now, I've got a train to catch. She talks about working people. She talks about working people. Where was the Right Honourable Lady when the comrades were on the picket line last Thursday? Where was she when the Labour front bench were joining them rather than standing up for the public? She was at the Glyndebourne Music Festival, sipping champagne, listening to opera. Champagne socialism is back in the Labour Party.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that says a lot about the party opposite. I'll tell them a few things about militancy. It's this government that are acting in a militant way. And while they should have been at the negotiating table, they were at the banqueting table getting hundreds of thousands squeezed out of their donors instead of dealing with a crisis. And he talks about trains. No one can get trains because of his failed transport minister, Mr. Speaker. And I tell you, he has a stronger stomach than his...
I think we'll just have a little quiet. I want to hear the question, and you'll also want to hear the answer. Angela Rayner.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think it's rather ironic that you have to intervene because of the baying mob here when they've got people through their noisy protest laws being protesting out on the street. The thing is, Mr. Speaker, they don't like it when the public say what they think of them. But I tell you, the honourable gentleman opposite has a stronger stomach than his colleagues behind him.
Honestly, I want to hear the question, I want to hear the answer. And I hate to say it, so do your constituents. Think about them for once instead of yourselves. Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And when they were asked about the absent Prime Minister's plans to stick around until 2030, one honourable member opposite said he'd lost the plot. Another one said anyone with half a brain would realise how dire things are. Yeah. And a former Conservative leader said that the country would be better off under new leadership. Yeah. And now the Prime Minister is at war with his own Defence Secretary after confirming he will break his manifesto pledge an increase in defence spending. Under this government, Britain is set to have less troops, less planes and less ships. The only thing the Prime Minister's interested in is defending his own job. Just how many more troops have to lose their jobs before he finally says enough is enough?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In fact, there's a £24 billion increase for armed forces. Spending on the armed forces is rising to 2.3% of GDP, again making us the largest military spender in Europe. And frankly, we'll take no lessons from the Right Honourable Lady when it comes to security in this country. First thing she did when she became an MP, 2016, voted against Trident, leaving us exposed. And she was campaigning for the Right Honourable Member for Islington North to be Prime Minister, someone who would take us out of NATO.
Mr. Speaker, talking about NATO, where was the honourable member when the situation in Afghanistan on a sun lounger? That's where the honourable member was. I take no lectures from the honourable member when it comes to doing your job. The Prime Minister said he felt no shame over the by-election defeats. He said his government have been quite exceptional. Well, I agree that they've been exceptional, all right. An exceptional record on stagnant wages, rising poverty and broken promises. And the Prime Minister wants to drag this out until 2030. And how much more can he stomach before he finds the guts, Mr. Speaker? How many more tax rises? How many more families drove into poverty? And how many manifesto pledges broken? I hope for the sake of the British public, Mr. Speaker, that we never find out. And when will the Deputy Prime Minister finally grow a backbone and tell the Prime Minister the game is up?
Mr. Speaker, I can't help thinking that Right Honourable Lady is auditioning for the leadership contest on that side, not really referring to anything on this side. She's got the support of the honourable member. Look, I'll tell you what we're doing. We're putting in place the policies to grow our economy to help...
Mr Murray, we've had a good questions already for Scotland. It's not continued. It's not your debate. Come on.
Mr. Speaker, he was just announcing his support for the Right Honourable Lady in the forthcoming... We're putting in place the economic plan to help people with the cost of living. The Labour leader is getting ready for year zero. We're the ones supporting Ukraine with sanctions on Russia, with military support. The Honourable Lady voted to abolish Trident. We're the ones making the streets safer, more police and tougher sentencing under the Police Crime Sentencing Act in force this week. She voted against both. They got no plan. They're not fit to govern, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Eden Project North has been 5 years of my parliamentary life. We've gone through 3 Prime Ministers, 4 Chancellors, a plethora of ministers, but no, what we've got to the point is that the levelling up bid is going to go in very shortly. We've got a shovel-ready plan, we've got full planning permission. Does my right honourable friend agree with me? It is money worth spending in Morecambe.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend, there is no greater and more tenacious campaigner than the honourable member for his constituents. He'll know. I can't discuss the details of any specific bids, but the next round of funding allocations will be announced in the autumn, so we won't have to wait too much longer.
Leader of the SNP, Ian Black.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate myself with the remarks of the Deputy Prime Minister and the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party at the sad death of Dame Deborah James. Our thoughts and prayers are with her family at this trying time, and we thank her for all that she has done to raise money for anti-cancer. Mr Speaker, Scotland's First Minister has set the date and started the campaign. Our nation will have its independence referendum on the 19th of October 2023. The reality is Scotland has already paid the price for not being independent. Westminster governments we did not vote for, imposing policies we don't support, breaking international law, dragging Scotland through a damaging Brexit we didn't vote for, and delivering deep austerity cuts. Contrast that with our European neighbours, who have greater income equality, lower poverty rates and higher productivity. Mr Speaker, why not Scotland? In the weeks and months ahead, we will make the positive case for independence. Will the opposition, if they can, make the case for continued Westminster rule?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank the honourable gentleman? It's always good to see him in his place. No, genuinely, it's good to see him in his place. It's not the right time for another referendum, given the challenges that we face as one united kingdom. And I think, and he referred to some of the challenges in Scotland, but I think actually the people of Scotland want their two governments to work together, and we are keen, willing, enthusiastic to do so.
Ian Blackford.
There is no case for the union, as we've just heard from the Deputy Prime Minister, because, Mr Speaker, the harsh reality is that the Tories might fear democratic debate, but they don't have the right to block Scottish democracy. As the late Canon Kenyon Wright said, what if the other voice we all know so well responds by saying, "We say no, we are the state"? His answer, well, we say yes, and we are the people. Just last year, the member for Murray, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives no less, put it in his own words: a vote for the Scottish National Party is another vote for an independence referendum. Well, you won't often hear me say this, but I agree with him, and so do the Scottish people. Scottish democracy will not be a prisoner of any Prime Minister in this place. So why is the UK government scared of democracy? Or is it simply that they have run out of ideas to defend the failing Westminster system?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank the honourable gentleman. I think he's rather airbrushing history with that long soliloquy. But look, he mentioned the problems that Scotland faces: huge tax burden imposed by the SNP, the Scotland's record on science and maths under the international PISA rankings are now have dropped below England and Wales, and the SNP have presided over the worst drug death rate in Europe, the highest since records began. I think the people of Scotland expect their government in Holyrood and in Westminster to work together to tackle the issues facing them in their day-to-day lives. That's what we're doing.
Peter Alders.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. There are great opportunities. Mr Speaker. Speaker, my sincere apologies. There are, Mr Speaker, great opportunities to create exciting new jobs in low-carbon energy along the East Anglian coast, and East Coast College are up for the challenge of providing local people with the necessary skills. However, they and other colleges are finding it increasingly difficult to recruit and retain teachers in such work as fabrication, engineering and construction. Will my right honourable friend ensure that the government come up with a cross-departmental strategy to address this staffing crisis in our further education colleges, which could undermine the levelling up agenda?
Obviously, Deputies Day. Come on,
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and that's why we're investing nearly £52 million to support the sector in recruiting and retaining excellent staff, and in particular looking and focusing on the experience and the skills that we can often find in industry to train the next generation of technical experts.
Neil Hamby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
No country that values its independence and indeed its self-respect could agree to a treaty which signed away its economic independence and self-government. Ultimately, membership of any union that involves pooling of sovereignty can only be sustained with the consent of the people. Yes. Does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with the Prime Minister and his predecessor? Yes or no?
Yeah. Deputy Prime Minister.
I just say to the honourable gentleman, that's why we had the referendum a few years ago. The people of Scotland spoken, and we think it's not the right time to be relitigating this issue.
John Burren.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking with Lord Ahmed yesterday, I thank the government for now listening and allowing high-risk British Council contractors still in Afghanistan to be processed immediately upon their application to the Citizen Resettlement Scheme and not having to wait a further 2 months until the application window closes. With taxation at a 40-year high, when will the government be bolder in cutting taxes, given all the evidence the world over shows that lower taxes increases prosperity, raises living standards, and better enables the government to help the less fortunate, even if such a policy means cutting spending such as HS2?
My honourable friend makes an important point about driving growth in the economy, and that's why we're cutting taxes with the 130% super deduction for capital investment. That will not just create good jobs, but well-paid jobs and better-paid jobs by boosting productivity. That's why we're increasing the employment allowance, which represents a tax cut of £1,000 for 500,000 small businesses. That's why we've provided business rate relief of £7 billion over the next 5 years. And of course, we're cutting national insurance just next month, worth £330 for a typical employee.
Patricia Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Tory MSP Murdo Fraser points out, Scotland has a third of Britain's landmass, half its territorial waters, over 60% of UK fishing zones, 98% of oil reserves, 63% of natural gas, a quarter of Europe's offshore wind resources and 90% of the UK's fresh water. Can the Deputy Prime Minister explain if his opposition to Scottish independence is because he fears the loss of these invaluable resources?
Deputy Prime Minister.
She's absolutely right in what she just said. There are huge assets right across Scotland, and that's why we think we're stronger together in delivering for the people of Scotland.
Oliver Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Prime Minister will be aware that in North East Hertfordshire we have some of the best farmland in the country. And at a time when there are concerns about food production, food security, at a time when the government is considering rural land use, isn't it time to ensure that our productive farmland isn't covered in solar plants and that they are positioned rather on brownfield sites, on buildings and on low-grade agricultural land?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I think he makes a powerful point, and our 2023 land use framework will set out our priorities for land use across the country, and he's right that we've got to protect the most versatile agricultural land, and any plans for ground-mounted solar installations will have to take that very point into account. His point is well made.
Rosie Duffy.
So far this year, 52 women have been killed in the UK. Our rights to free speech, safe spaces, fairness in sport, and even the words we use to describe our own bodies are all under threat. Will the Deputy Prime Minister send a clear signal, as some of his Cabinet colleagues have done this week, that Britain respects the rights of women, and will he accept the cross-party amendment to his forthcoming Bill of Rights, which enshrines a woman's right to choose in law?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank the Honourable Lady for her question? Can I also just say at the outset what huge respect I personally have for her with the way she stood up for women's rights and frankly the appalling harassment, trolling and bullying that she's faced. The position, as she knows, is settled in UK law in relation to abortion. It's decided by honourable members across this House. It's an issue of conscience. I don't think there is a strong case for change. What I wouldn't want to do is find ourselves with the greatest respect in the US position where this is being litigated through the courts rather than settled, as it is now settled, by honourable members in this House.
Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In February 2019, the
this House passed my excellent Civil Partnerships, Marriages and Deaths Registration, etc. Act, mandating government to extend civil partnerships to opposite-sex couples, enabling marriage records to include mothers' details, and requiring the Justice Secretary to produce a report empowering coroners to investigate stillbirths. The first two have come into force very successfully, but 2.5 years on, despite further shocking revelations about deaths of babies at several hospitals, no report has yet been published, nor regulations to give coroners the powers they need. Why not?
Can I thank
Prime Minister?
Can I thank my honourable friend? He's absolutely right to raise this, and of course stillbirth is an appalling tragedy which has the most devastating impact on families across the country. He's right, the MOJ, the DHSC have jointly consulted on proposals to provide coroners with new powers in this regard. I have looked at this personally. We will be publishing the government's response to the consultation very shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Threatened, terrified, alone. This was how survivors of sexual violence told me they felt when they were pressured into signing non-disclosure agreements and gagging clauses by their universities. No victim of sexual assault or harassment should ever be coerced into silence by the very institutions who are meant to protect them. Not at university, not at work, not anywhere. So will the government back my bill to ban the use of NDAs in cases of sexual harassment, bullying and misconduct? And will the Deputy Prime Minister consider meeting with me in his role as Justice Secretary to discuss how we'll put a stop to this deplorable practice once and for all?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I just say to the Honourable Lady, I'll look very carefully at any particular proposals she has. We've got to do everything we can to protect women and girls in this country, and also, frankly, to make them feel more confident in the justice system. That's why I'm relieved, but restless to go further, but relieved that the volume of rape convictions in the last year alone is up by 2/3. And of course, in the Police Courts Sentencing and Crime Act in force this week, we have taken extra measures, for example, by extending the time limit for reporting domestic abuse, and also criminalising taking photos of a mother breastfeeding without consent. And I'll certainly look at the proposals that she's raised with me.
Daniel Kaczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are investing nearly £190 billion this year into the NHS, and yet many of us see disturbing deficiencies within NHS management, no more so than in the Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust. 4 years ago, in 2018, my right honourable friend, the member for Ludlow, and I secured £312 million for a major A&E modernisation within our local hospital trust. 4 years on, construction has still not started. What message can the Deputy Prime Minister give to the people of Shrewsbury as to how government can intervene to break this gridlock and finally allow the £312 million we have secured to be utilised for the benefits of the people of Shropshire and Mid Wales?
Well, my honourable friend is a doughty champion of his constituents, particularly on NHS services. The DHSC recently received the strategic outline case for the transformation of A&E services in Shrewsbury and Telford. It's still being processed, but I can tell him that the Trust is aiming to present the full business case in 2023, with construction starting in the same year.
Liz Savile-Roberts.
When he announced his Bill of Rights last week, the Deputy Prime Minister said it will strengthen our UK tradition of freedom. Freedom, shameless, from a government whose contempt for the rule of law and devolution can be judged in equal measure. They're scrapping Welsh law against our will, denying Scotland the right to choose their own future. That isn't freedom. Will he prove me wrong? Will he prove me wrong by enshrining self-determination in his Bill of Rights?
Can I thank the Honourable Lady? I thought it was very deft the way she got that in. I think we've all heard, actually, across the benches today the case for reinforcing free speech, whether it's the judge-made privacy laws or some of the way people are shouted down when they express legitimate opinions. And I also think that the people of Wales will want to join with us, as true across the country, in making sure we can deport more foreign national offenders. That is the reality for the people in Wales and across the United Kingdom, and I think the Bill of Rights will be strengthening our tradition of freedom, but also curbing those abuses and making sure we inject a bit more common sense into the system.
Johnny Mercer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Derriford Hospital in my constituency is part of the new hospital build programme announced by this government, and work on the new emergency department actually starts this year, which is a significant investment for the amazing staff there and the brilliant Chief Executive, Anne James, who works so hard. But given the incredible pressures on the real estate in Derriford, would my honourable friend consider prioritising capital investment into that part of the UK to ensure that we can accelerate these plans, particularly in digital, so that people in Plymouth get the world-class healthcare they deserve?
Can I thank our honourable friend? Look, he's absolutely right. This is the largest hospital building programme in a generation, and his constituents are going to benefit very directly. I can tell him that there will be a new integrated emergency care hospital scheme for University Hospitals Plymouth NHS Trust at the Derriford Emergency Care Hospital. And yes, on tech, he's absolutely right. The facilities will be at the cutting edge of modern technology, and that will really help drive up the quality of patient care.
Bill Furness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The victims of black cab rapist John Warboys were only able to challenge the police's failure to investigate its appalling crimes because of the Human Rights Act. They would not have been able to do so under the Deputy Prime Minister's new so-called Bill of Rights. Why does he want to stop women like the victims of John Warboys from making sure that police protect them from rape and sexual assault and getting the justice they deserve?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank the honourable lady for the opportunity? It was not the result of litigation that addressed the problems with the Warboy case. And indeed, if she wants to look after victims in cases like that and others, the Labour Party should join with us, not just in supporting the Bill of Rights, but our parole reforms that will make sure dangerous offenders are not released and we protect the public.
David Simmons.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my constituent Joel Lindop has suffered the abduction of his young children to Poland, one of many families in the UK who go through a similar experience every year. And despite repeated judgments in his favour in the courts in Poland, he's been unable to persuade the Polish authorities to fulfil their obligations under international law and return those children to their family. Will my right honourable friend intercede and ensure that my constituent and the many other families who face this challenge are able to ensure that their children are returned safely and in a timely fashion in the future?
Can I thank my honourable friend? Look, I can't imagine how appalling that situation must be for any parent to find themselves in. He'll know we're committed to the 1980 Hague Convention on Child Abduction, and that does provide a mechanism. He's right that that's one that has to be driven through the courts, and that's not something we can directly interfere on, but I will make sure, and I'll speak to the Foreign Office and see if the Minister can address whether there's anything further that we can properly do to support him.
Brendan Magnus.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. A serious question on the conduct of the government as regards free trade agreements. And I cannot understate the fury of the International Trade Committee this morning that led us to unanimously empty chair the Secretary of State for International Trade. The government has broken its word to the committee, to the House and to you, Mr. Speaker, on scrutiny of the Australian trade deal by triggering Crag and now endangering a committee report. It is the unanimous view of the committee, Mr. Speaker, Tory, Labour, SNP and DUP, that Crag should be delayed to allow proper scrutiny, as was promised. Will the government deliver on its promise and therefore delay Crag?
I understand,
Prime Minister.
I understand, Mr. Speaker, that the Secretary of State for International Trade has agreed to come back and address the committee just as soon as possible.
James Sunderland.
Mr. Speaker, I was privileged last week to attend the Malaria Summit in Kigali. Even today, malaria remains the biggest single killer of mankind ever, and 1.7 billion people are living every day under its shadow of misery. But, Mr. Speaker, we're on the cusp of something really special, in that recent advances, education and our British world-leading vaccines can now eradicate it forever. Can my right honourable friends please confirm that the UK will fulfil its full commitment to the Global Fund?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend? And I know from working at the Foreign Office just how powerful the Global Fund is. It's a very high-performing international organisation. He will know that since 2002 we've been the third largest donor, so we've stepped up to the plate. The UK hasn't yet determined our pledge for the 7th replenishment, but I know the Foreign Secretary will have heard loud and clear the advocacy that he's made in their regard.
Final question, Bel Ribeiro Addy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In their efforts to pursue a hostile environment, the Home Office routinely tears families apart and breaks human rights and equalities legislation. They're reported to be sending up yet another charter deportation flight to Nigeria and Ghana. In Pride Month, they'll be deporting LGBT asylum seekers, fleeing homophobia, and grandmothers and mothers of British children who have lived in this country for over 25 years. Given that the Home Office repeatedly get it wrong and end up having to take people off these flights, can the Deputy Prime Minister tell me how many people have been removed from this flight already, and when will they stop these inhumane deportation charter flights?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I thank the honourable lady. Look, she's right at least in one respect. Of course, people who come here need to be treated decently and humanely. We're absolutely committed to that. We also need to make sure that we cut down the illegal routes, and those that are here who've committed serious offences can be returned home. And the crucial thing, and I'm working with the Home Secretary, is to make sure we do both of those things. But what we can't allow is illegal routes to flourish into this country, otherwise we'll just attract more. And we cannot allow people who commit serious offences in this country to stay and continue to pose a threat to the public.
Ends questions.